My name is Matt Selbie, and I'm the founder and president of a company based here in Portland called Oberon3. We have a customer feedback technology that we sell mainly to service businesses. The technology is called Opiniator, and it allows any business to be able to hear, listen, and act on customer feedback in real time from customers who are consuming the product or experiencing the service. So customers are retail, restaurants, hospitality, medical, banking, financial services, and field services. Companies like pest control, installers, anyone who has employees based out of the office. I've worked for most of my career in the oil business, and both here in the States and in Europe and in some other parts as well. And one of the things that when you sell gasoline, you need to be really close to your customers, because it's what they call a low involvement purchase. People switch gasoline brands almost all the time. So you've really got to understand what motivates them to buy and stay with your gasoline product. So during the course of all of that time, one of the bits of research that I got done, I was the brands manager at ConocoPhillips a few years ago, was who is best in class at customer feedback. And best in class here means taking that feedback and doing something with it. Okay? And during the course of that research, we found out that Gartner had done some studies 4 years ago, and came up with a metric that whilst 95% of corporate America engages in some form of customer feedback, great news. The bad news is that only 10% actually did anything with it. So at that point, there was a kind of a light bulb goes on to say, you know, what a bunch of yo-yos. 95% of you are spending money doing customer feedback, but only 10% of you actually doing anything with that. So from that and a number of other things came the idea that if we can provide some technology that allowed any business, starting with restaurants, but any business, to be able to take feedback and do something with it in order to retain customers, we may have a business opportunity on our hands, because the economics of customer retention, as you know in your business, are always more powerful than the economics of customer acquisition. And that's been proved time and time again. So that's where the idea came from. And then we thought about, well, okay, so how are we going to do that? And at that point, the rise of the mobile phone was really starting to begin, as was the rise of peer group ratings. So people distrusted corporate America, but they would trust their friends. So how do you marry actionable feedback to increase retention with a mobile phone, with this kind of rise of peer group reviews? And we came up with some technology that allowed the mobile phone to be used both as a feedback mechanism, and of course it's capex free and expense free for the business. We started to play around with that. So now we have an offer that allows a customer to take feedback with voice, through voice call, through a text messages, or through any web-enabled device, so a mobile browser or any other browser. And we marry that into the same survey engine and crunch the numbers and spit out alerts in real time, actually within about 2 seconds of the customer taking that survey. Well, I don't think we've achieved kind of nirvana in this. I think it's one of these Chinese water torture processes where you just keep going, but I think I'm relatively numerate, and I try to always ensure that in any customer conversation you emphasize what you're solving, and make sure that the problem that you're solving is big enough for the customer that you're talking to. And then translate that into some form of metric or return on investment that the customer can understand. I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but you take a return on investment that's appropriate for the business that you're talking to. So if you can present to that customer a way of saying the return on investment is, whether that's a payback period, a kind of discounted cash flow, cost savings, revenue increase, that's by far the biggest way that you will gain his attention, particularly if you compare the return on investment to what you know he's currently getting. So for example, we're here in a restaurant, so if he was spending $50 a month on some form of customer feedback program, what I would want to do is to go in there and say, well, if you spend $50 with me, you would get double the incremental value, or whatever that might be. Double the feedback, double the analytics, and hopefully double the retention rate of your customer base. So that's the way that I would try and educate them. So you've always got to put some form of return on investment. Otherwise, you're assuming that the guy's not, economically driven, which is in this day and age is not really the case. The company provides, as we've evolved, and this probably won't surprise you, the value proposition has changed at the company. I'd love to be, if you're an investor, I probably wouldn't say that, but let's assume that we're not going to investors. The value proposition has grown and it's changed. So traditionally, we simply gave analytics back to the business. We would give them analytics around the ratings, thoughts, and opinions of customers. So that's one source of value, but the second source of value that we now give is the ability for that customer, that business customer, to take immediate action based on the feedback that the customer is giving it. So let's say, for example, as we hear in the restaurant, that you gave a poor score for coffee quality. That feedback would then be given back to the business and the business manager. And because you've given a poor rating, he would immediately get a notification that some customer has given some score that is not good, so that he would want to check whatever business process is going on, the quality of his coffee equipment, whatever it happens to be. So the second value that we now deliver is for the business to take immediate actionable feedback. One of our competitive advantages is that most feedback mechanisms is too late to take any action. If you ask me about some process or product the day after I had it, there's really no point, because you may well have already gone to the next coffee shop or the next restaurant. So the second value proposition is immediate feedback. But the third, which is a much less obvious one for us, is that whenever you ask customers for their feedback, and you do it in a way that's both structured and unstructured, an unstructured way is, what do you think about? That question normally elicits a string of testimonial. So that's an interesting piece of value that that customer now has. He's got real testimonial from real customers in real time. And if he's smart, he's going to do something with that. He may put that on his website, he may put that on his social media account. So that's a third source of value. The second two, the last two, the alert capability and what I would call the social media content, frankly was unforeseen when I started the company. It was largely based around analytics. I think the most significant hurdle is business education. We provide a fundamentally different and potentially disruptive way for businesses to be able to elicit, receive, and analyze customer feedback. We do things very differently relative to existing alternatives, things like mystery shopping, comment cards, web surveys, email surveys. So what we do is fundamentally different, and therefore the biggest challenge is to be able to overcome and educate customers so that they see our technology as providing much greater benefit than current alternatives. I think that the biggest area that we have underestimated is the conservative nature of some of the customers we are going after, who have been slower to make a decision around new technology. I think the economy has produced fewer folk who are willing to take a risk on the type of disruptive technology that we provide, and therefore it's been a slower burn for those organizations to make the decision to do something different. So I think the speed of decision making, I don't think it's tripped us up, but it's been something that we underestimated. I think what's been very useful for me personally, having spent 20 years in the corporate world, is to be able to unearth some of the free resources that are around, particularly discussion groups, forums, individuals. Here in Portland, I think there's a really rich vein of people who will collectively want to help you think through some decisions that need to be made. So to be able to tap into people on a sort of casual basis has been a huge and welcome surprise, one that I hadn't thought existed coming from the background that I did. I think we're probably standing at the edge of a couple. I think the biggest, but they're nicer business to be able to stand at the edge of it. So one of them is the technology's been around out in the field now for 2 years. So we have an awful lot of road testing underneath our belt, and we have current customers who enjoy the software. We're due for a fairly significant period of expansion. So the abyss is, how do we get hold of, manage appropriate people to join the company? It's one of talent management, specifically talent acquisition, where there's an awful lot of things that we could do with the company in many, many different verticals. So we're looking for good people to be able to help us do that, but so many other companies. So how do you get the word out and have an offer out there that is as attractive as the next guy? So that's one abyss. I think the next abyss is the company could go in a number of different directions. Not so much from a product point of view, but from a market point of view. So we started off life as having some technology specifically for restaurants and hospitality, which seemed to be the most overt in their desire to get good customer feedback. But ironically, they'd be more difficult to secure, which meant that we had to go into other verticals. And now we're fairly strong in healthcare, for example. So what we need to do now is to figure out which verticals are the most profitable for us to be able to attack in the short term. So we have this range of customer types in a range of different verticals, but we need to be able to focus on those that will give us the best return in the short term. So the abyss is, but it's a nice abyss, which one do we go after and really focus on? 3 children, a wife, rats, guinea pigs, chickens. I think that in all of the stories that I've read about entrepreneurs and successful businesses, it's generally not a one-hit wonder. You don't generally get there overnight. It's one of slow attrition and getting there over a period of time. And so that's pretty inspirational, knowing that others have taken their time getting to a point where it really starts to take off. I think the second thing is, this is just good fun. And having spent quite a lot of time in the corporate world where it may not be quite as good fun, having your own business and getting customers to write you checks, it's good fun. Well, I'm a Brit, and so there's a guy in the UK called Richard Branson that you'll know through the Virgin brand over here, that I think is a hugely inspirational figure, simply because of the way he runs his companies, which is a sort of loose, tight arrangement where he finds really good people to be able to run his businesses. The second thing is that I think his control and use of the brand is spectacular. And the third thing is just the way he conducts himself, totally above the board and getting things done. So a guy like Richard Branson is probably the biggest influence on how I'd like to conduct a business over here. The thing about Branson is he's probably, I'm 47 and he's probably 57, so he's 10 years above me. He started off life, he's one of these people who dropped out of college, came from a very wealthy background. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. So he came from what I understand, he came from a very privileged background, but he started life selling records, plastic vinyl under the Virgin brand. Out of a garage, and I kind of like that story where someone takes, it's not rags to riches, but it's humble beginnings of a business into something that spirals off. So he started doing that in a very disruptive way, but he's transformed his brand into something that stands for innovation, fun, and competency. And if I had a company that had 2 out of those 3, I'd be pretty happy. He's got 3 out of 3. So he's known for not only the airline, but insurance business, financial services. Here in the States, it's largely through media, through telecoms. But I think he's done very, very well. And just the way he transacts, I think, is admirable in a time where There's a lot of nefarious things going on and skullduggery and interesting characters. He's done very well.